Well, now I've seen this man's videos time and time again. Every single time I say I have to get this man on my program. Each and every time I say I must, then I get in contact with Harvey Brownstone. That's my guest for today. And I let him down about two or three times. And I things happened in my life and it just became, impossible for Harvey to even think that this thing was ever going to happen. But here he is in the flesh, Harvey Brownstone, with the wonderful, wonderful Harvey Brownstone interviews that he does right here on YouTube. What a fabulous job you do, Harvey.
Thank you so much, Ralph, for inviting me on your show. And thank you for watching my show.
I got hooked on your show maybe about 2 years ago. And the eclectic guests are so fantastic. I mean, you range from authors to actors. You just run the gamut.
I do. My primary goal is to get celebrities. That's really what I do. But once in a while, there'll be an author who's written a book that really touched me that I didn't feel got any exposure, that the exposure it should have gotten. And so I do invite those authors on my show, particularly Holocaust authors, authors that have written about the Holocaust. My mother was a Holocaust survivor, and I'm very interested in that part of history. So those authors always get a free space on my show.
Well, that's great. And I know a few things about you. You're born in Paris. Am I right on that?
Right, right. I'm from France originally.
And then Canadian. You came to Canada from Paris, yes?
That's right. We came here to Canada from France when I was 3 years old.
And a former judge in Ontario?
Right, in Toronto. I was a judge for 26 years in criminal court and family court.
Now, I have to ask you, how did you make the transition from sitting on the bench to behind the bench? How do you phrase it? Behind or on the bench? One or the
Yeah,
other, right?
on the bench.
On the bench sounds like a sports term, but it's not. Sitting on the bench and going to this venue, this thing where you host your own show. How did that happen?
I was always a talk show junkie. I grew up watching Dick Cavett and David Frost and Barbara Walters, Johnny Carson, all of those interviewers. When we were growing up, there was Merv Griffin and Mike Douglas, and I was just in love with those talk shows because I felt I could do better. My whole life, I was frustrated by all of those talk show hosts, Larry King, all of them, because I always felt I could do better. I didn't feel they asked the questions that were profound enough, and I didn't think they followed up when a guest said something. They didn't follow up. It was like they weren't listening. And so it was always my dream to be a talk show host, but reality sets in. I wanted to be a successful professional, so I became a lawyer and then I became a judge. Funny, when you're a judge, Ralph, you are hosting your own talk show every day in the
That's true.
courtroom. It's just that I didn't really like the audience and I didn't like my guests. But when I turned 65 after doing it for 26 years, I was eligible for my pension, and I decided I would try doing a talk show because by then Zoom was invented. And once Zoom was available, I didn't have to go to Hollywood or New York. I could do it from my own home and see whether anybody famous would talk to me. And the truth, Ralph, is that this was going to be a hobby. It was just going to be a post-retirement hobby to see if I could get anybody famous to talk to me. But it took off. It actually took off. The celebrities were intrigued that a former judge would want to be an interviewer. And then the audience got intrigued because I quickly realized that the way I ask questions is not like other interviewers. I'm really conducting an examination in chief, not an interview.
Oh, yeah, yeah. I got that feeling in a good way. Not like you're interrogating, but you're really, you got him on the witness stand to a certain extent. And it's very interesting the way you go about it because, again, you're very, very unique. That's no doubt about that. And I'm not an easy mark. I'll see something, I say, I don't want to waste my time on that. I can't spend my time listening to that guy. The moment I tuned into you, I said, well, first of all, you had a guest if I could remember the guests, because I'm an actor, so the guests that I used to be, I haven't acted in about 5, 6 years, but I still call myself an actor. But the
You
guests you
sure
had,
look like a leading man.
thank you very much. The guests you had I don't know who it was. I wish I could remember, but I don't. And the guest was not talking very much. And you were he was giving you kind of 5 words here and there, if that much. And I don't know if you were frustrated, but I said, come on, expound a little bit on what you're saying. But you handled it beautifully. And eventually the guests came around. And before you knew it, you had a great back and forth. And I'll remember the guests before this segment is over, I promise. But that was my initiation to you.
Well, I'm so grateful that you found my show, because as you know, you said something very important that you don't want to waste your time. I don't know if you agree with me, but YouTube is really clogged with a lot of amateurish people that just because they have a webcam and a microphone doesn't mean that they have any skills at all. And so the public is inundated with all of this junk out there. And if you don't have an advertising budget, and I don't, how do people find you? So I'm just so grateful that you found my show because, we're in our 5th year. I'm very, very lucky to have acquired an audience, but it is hard. And I'm so glad that when you watched it, you saw something in me. And I'm lucky that I guess because I did come out of the courtroom and I do have this unusual way of asking questions that are very specific. They're very well researched. I make sure the audience and the guests know that I really did my homework. I know everything about their careers, that it took off. But it is hard to become a success on YouTube. There's just so much competition and most of it is junk.
Your introductions are legendary. I mean, you reel off information about the guest he doesn't know. He doesn't
know
remember.
why I do that? I'll tell you why I do that. I get a lot of people that ask me, why are your introductions so long? I can't stand it. I do it for 2 reasons. Number one, I want the guest to know that they're in the hands of a pro, that I did my homework and I've researched them. And the reason I had to do that is because once I started getting fairly big celebrities, they don't know me. They don't really want to be there. And, they would come on Zoom and before we'd start filming, they'd say something like, how long is this going to take? I wouldn't even get a hello. By the end of the introduction, they were in the palm of my hand. They knew.
Oh, yeah?
They knew. And so the main reason I do it, it's not for the audience. It's for the guest to figure out that I am not some schlepper that's just, wasting their time. I'm going to do a really professional job. And the other reason I do those introductions is for the audience so they can decide, do I even want to watch this interview? Who is this guy and what are they all about? So yes, my introductions have become legendary and I'm willing to admit that not everybody enjoys them, but the stars do.
You massage the ego just a little bit. I mean, let's face it, most of these people want to be massaged. And then you go about it in such it's a very not casual, very comfortable way where they settle in because this whole thing with Zoom is kind of new to many of us. I used to have people actually in my studio. I do radio in the studio opposite me. I actually get the feel of the person. I used to, but now, I do it in my pajamas here. I don't have pajamas on now, but I do it in any way I want to. Put a nice shirt on and you could have shorts on and you could have anybody from around the world opposite you on a screen. It's just a weird set of circumstances, wouldn't you say?
Oh, it is. And when you said you have to massage them, I mean, you have to massage these stars and give them a happy ending.
You said it, not me. So
I said it. Oh, no, these are people with big egos. And to be fair, they're not being paid to do the show. We do not pay any of our guests. These are all, for the most part, highly accomplished, very famous people. They've done a million interviews. They've been asked the same questions a million times. I feel for them because a lot of them were booked on my show without being asked. Their publicist just did it. And now I don't have that problem. I have to say, after about the first 2 years, I really got to be well known within the Hollywood community. The publicists, the managers, the agents got to know me. And I found that by the time the guest came on the show, they knew who I was, or they had heard of me, or some other celebrity had told them, you should go on Harvey's show. He knows you'll get a really good interview.
Yeah.
But the first 2 years, Ralph, that was hard.
It must have been. It must have been. I know when I contact somebody out of the blue, they have no idea. I was a New York actor. I wasn't a California actor, LA actor. They have no idea. Who's this Ralph Romeo? Who the heck is he? But you'd be surprised if you get in touch with the right person. He doesn't have to, or she doesn't have to know who you are. If you have I would get on Facebook Messenger out of the blue and just contact whomever, and they would eventually get back to me, and we'd have a back and forth on the Facebook Messenger. And before you know it, he's right there with me. And that's how I did it. And I'm used to doing my programs on the radio by myself. It's me just ranting and raving about what's going on in the world, in the country. So I'm not a big guest. I didn't rely on guests to enhance my program so much. But this is, of course, fantastic. Let me ask you a question. Now, you mentioned about these people. Who's one person who you said, well, he or she seems very standoffish, but boy, was I wrong. This person is the warmest person I've ever heard or seen in my life. Anybody come to mind?
Well, there was one early on. He wrote a book about his friendship with Lucille Ball. And his book was called I Loved Lucy. And his name was Lee Tannen. And I was a huge Lucy fan. So in the beginning, when I couldn't get any movie stars, I figured I'll go after authors because they're always willing to plug their books. They've got books to sell. And he did agree to come on the show, but he was a real tough New Yorker. And I think he'd been asked a million times about Lucy. And I had to warm him up. But I'll tell you, there were within a few minutes, he got very warm. I also thought Robert Wagner, I didn't really know what to expect with Robert Wagner. I'm a big fan. He was 93 when I got him on the show. He hasn't done an interview in many years, and I'm quite certain that the interview he gave me will be the last one he'll ever give. He's 95 now, and he turned out to be so warm and so lovely. A lot of these stars are really very nice people, but they don't want their time wasted, and they want to know they're in the hands of someone that knows what they're doing. And you see, you are a pro. First of all, you have the voice that anybody would want to listen to on the radio. You have a really professional radio voice, and you're also a very handsome guy. You have that going for you. I didn't have a show business background. I do not have the leading man looks that you have, and I don't have that voice. All I had was that I'm a fan who was a judge and who does his homework. That was all I had going for me. So, I had to warm them up. But I must tell you, most of the stars, with very few exceptions, have been exceptionally nice to me.
That's great. That's great. Did you ever have a situation where someone came on and started to spill their guts, so to speak? Give you things that you were so shocked they were giving you and maybe never had given ever before. Did that happen?
That has happened. The first time it happened was Lonnie Anderson. May she rest in peace. I think she forgot she was on doing an interview. She knew she was on Zoom, but the conversation got so intimate. She started talking about her marriage to Burt Reynolds. And about 3 or 4 minutes into it, she said, I've never talked about this before, but, and whenever I get a star saying that, I've never disclosed this before, but I know that I've got them relaxed enough that they feel they can open up. And so she did that. Gary Lewis, remember Gary Lewis and the Playboys?
Sure. I just watched that one 2 days ago.
Well, that was a very emotional interview. He actually was physically reacting to the conversation about his father. You could see the discomfort. He started twitching when he said, I think my dad was jealous of me. That was something he's never said to anybody else. And I've had that over and over and over again. And I attribute that to the fact that when I was a judge, I had to get people in the witness box to be relaxed enough to open up. Certainly, when I was a lawyer and I had to examine witnesses, I spent 40 years in a courtroom talking to strangers. And I think I'm good at getting people to open up. So it happened over and over again. We had, Adrienne Barbeau, who claimed to be best friends with Maud B. Arthur,
Yep. Yes.
said to me, to tell you the truth, I never watched the Golden Girls. I never saw it. I was like shocked.
She was a heartthrob. She was the sex symbol. I remember it was, believe it or not, Sally Struthers opposite Adrienne Barbeau. I always preferred Adrienne Barbeau. But I think I caught about 10 minutes. I had to do something. I caught about 10 minutes of that one. That one's an older one, right? The Barbeau.
Yeah,
That's an
that was
older
an
one.
older one.
And
Yeah.
I'm one of your biggest fans here in New York, that's for sure. And the one thing I forgot to remember, forgot to mention was the fact that you write books and that
Well,
you've written something that's coming out very soon, right?
yes, I wrote a book 10 years ago. When I was a family court judge, I wanted the public to know exactly what family court was and was it wasn't. And it was called Tug of War. And I'm very proud of that one because it was a national bestseller. It was on the bestseller list for 13 weeks. But this new book you mentioned, I wrote a memoir because I was Canada's first openly gay judge. I have had a very unusual story. My parents kicked me out when I was 19 when I told them I was gay back in 1976. I struggled as a homeless, penniless person to get myself through university and then law school. And then nobody would give me a job because I was gay. And I somehow created a career and became a judge. And then I was about to be appointed Chief Justice when, once again, I was told the government was not prepared to appoint a gay Chief Justice. So I basically told them all to fuck themselves and became a talk show host. And that book, which is coming out next year, it's called Without Prejudice, is going to be the subject of a major motion picture starring David Arquette and David Mazouz and Rachelle Lefevre. And we're filming that movie in November, and the movie will come out in the spring. That movie's being directed by Shane Stanley. So I'm very excited that my memoir is being made into a movie even before the book comes out.
That is thrilling. That is so, I'm excited for you. That is so fantastic. And you know the way they do movies. Now, is this going straight to Netflix or is this something that we could actually see in the theaters? Is that what's going to happen?
I think it's going to do a film festival run first. And then my prediction is that it will end up on Netflix or Amazon Prime or something. But the director, Shane Stanley, thinks that it might have a theatrical run. I just don't know. But in Hollywood, they're saying this is the gay Rocky. My story is basically the gay Rocky. Where you just keep getting kicked to the curb. You keep getting told no, no, no. And then you finally overcome every single obstacle. I guess I'm the gay Rocky.
You got to be up there, when you hit the top of that. Sylvester Stallone. I see him all over social media. He's all over. He's 80. I think he's 82 years old, and you can't go 2 clicks without seeing Sly Stallone doing something. He's got massive tattoos now. I remember when he did Rocky and Rambo, he had clear, skinned physique. Now he's got a bunch of tattoos. I think he got those tattoos at 70 years old or something like that. But nevertheless, I'm digressing. But here's one thing that I wanted to ask you too about the whole idea behind being the first gay judge in Canada. Did you say in Canada?
I guess I should be clear and say that I was the first openly gay
openly
judge,
gay. I'm sure that's
there
true.
could have been a few others, but I was certainly the first openly gay judge in Canada. Yes.
So you actually came out, no holds barred. And
well, I never made an announcement. I never hid it. I just didn't hide it. I was just me. And that's because, when your parents kick you out and you end up alone and the only 2 people who you ever really loved or cared about don't want you anymore, why did I care what anybody else would think of me? I just didn't care. So I never lived in the closet. I didn't hide it at law school or in university. Lots of my professors said, it's too bad you're a good student, but you're never going to get a job. Nobody's going to hire an openly gay lawyer. And this was 1976, it was a different time. But I didn't care. My attitude was, well, okay, so I'll get a job selling shoes at Macy's or something. I'm not gonna starve. I'll get a job. If I can't be a lawyer, I'll do something else. But I did get a job, and I was a good lawyer, and I found a way to. The trick is that you have to be 3 times better than everybody else to be considered equal. I guess it's what women have gone through, and people of color, and any minority that has had challenges. Certainly being gay was not easy back then, but I was pretty determined I was going to be somebody, and I knew I was good enough. I would go to court and I'd learn from the other lawyers and I watched the judges, and I knew I could do it. I just needed to work harder than everybody else so that I would be considered as good as everybody else. And that's
And it
really
also
what the
does.
book is about.
That's what the book is about. And that doesn't come up in normal conversation. One sexuality or sexual proclivity does not come up in normal conversation. Usually it's kind of, but in 1976, which my goodness is almost 50 years ago, it was a far different world than we face these days, wouldn't you say?
Well, you're right that it doesn't come up, but I can't speak for other people, but everybody just assumed when they met me that I was. There was something about, I don't think I'm the most flamboyant person in the world.
No.
I wasn't running around like Paul Lynde or Liberace or that guy on Will and Grace, who's cracking funny gay lines all the time. But it was obvious. It must have been because I was bullied as a kid, badly bullied for being a faggot. And, I would go to court as a lawyer, and I'd have judges say things like, Mr. Brownstone, do you ride side saddle? And I know what they're saying, and I'd say, well, Your Honor, it depends on the horse.
Yeah.
I mean, it always came out. And when I was having interviews, I graduated at the top of my class in law school, and I couldn't get a job at all the big corporate firms because they didn't think I'd fit in. So I don't think it has to actually be mentioned. I think people I have one of those personality. Maybe it's the tone of my voice. Maybe it's my mannerisms. I don't know. But everybody has, let me put it this way, Ralph, nobody has ever been shocked to find out that Harvey Brownstone was gay. So I wasn't going to hide it. I don't think I could have hidden it. I don't think I just couldn't. I had friends that were gay that got married to women and put on an act and screwed around behind their wives' backs until they got caught. I just couldn't do it, Ralph. I don't know how to be that dishonest. I can't.
I always found you to be very forthright. We've never met before, and folks, you should know that. I mean, to this moment, we've never met, but I always found I could glean a lot of one's personality when I watch something, believe it or not, on a screen. I can see where that person is coming from. It's not foolproof. I could be wrong sometimes, but for the most part, I want good people on my show. And I said, this is a good person, a genuine person that I have to have on my program. And that's how I go about my business. By the way,
thank you, Ralph. Let me thank you so much for doing that, because I don't think many people would. As you understand this as an actor and as a radio host, you're putting on an act when you're hosting a show and doing an interview. At least I am. It's not the Harvey that you see on my show isn't the Harvey that's talking to you now, because I'm much more unguarded. I can relax because you're running it and you get to see who I really am. But the fact that you could watch my show and still tell that you liked the person you were seeing, that says a lot about you. That you can read people.
I think I'm a good judge of character. Again, it's not 100%, but I've been through a little bit where I know a phony when I see one, and I've never thought of you as a phony. And again, drawn to the fact that you have all these people from different walks of life. You mentioned Liberace before, and he was #1 in America for 2 decades. Maybe I'm exaggerating, but close to it. Didn't you have someone connected to to Liberace in a video. What was that about? Because I saw it, but I don't remember it very well for
That's one
some
of our
reason.
most successful interviews. We had the young man who was Liberace's protege. He lived in his home. He makes it clear that they were not lovers. He was a pianist that Liberace took an interest in, and Liberace really shaped him as a musician. And he did live in his home. That interview went so viral, I was inundated with requests to have him come back on the show. So 3 weeks later, and I've only done this one other time. That was with Tony Orlando. We had the guy back. His name is Steve Gary, and we talked a lot about what Liberace was really like and what happened during his illness and after he died. And so, yeah, we did have a Liberace interview, two of them.
And it's funny, in the era when he was so popular, the housewives were so into him. They were devoted to him. Yet he was gay and he never mentioned the fact, and that's his prerogative, that he was gay. He went to his grave never actually saying those words, hey, I am gay, right?
Exactly. And he never admitted that he had AIDS. You know,
Oh, I didn't
he
know that.
he not only did Liberace never
Hmm.
admit that he was gay, but there was a newspaper in England that outed him and he sued them and he won.
Mm. Well, it should be his to say. Unfortunately, it doesn't work out that way sometimes, but it should be for the person to either come out, like they say, come out, or not come out. I mean, why does somebody have to out somebody? But then again, this means I grew up in the well, not in my I became an actor at the age of 27, something like that, 26, 27. And the theater, of course, I had many, it sounds terrible, but many gay men around me. So I was assumed here's a good looking guy. Here's a guy who takes care of his body. Here's a guy who's very physical. He must be gay. I'm not. I'm a straight man. And people would always assume things. But when we got into the confines of the theater, it never really came up. It didn't. The sexuality of anyone never really came up. It was very communal. The whole situation, usually,
Did you have gay men come on to you?
all the time.
And how
And
did you deal with that?
I would say that I'm very flattered, but it's just not my natural way to go. I mean, it's just not me. And
Now you see
that's
what that
exactly how I
tells
would do
me.
it.
What that tells me, Ralph, is that you're very comfortable in your own skin. You're not threatened. There are people like you that are good looking. They don't take it as a compliment. They're threatened and they get angry and sometimes they even get violent. But you are so comfortable with who you are. You're not, your sexuality is something that you are at ease with, that it doesn't scare you if some guy says, "Oh, they might think you might be gay," which they shouldn't. I mean, there's lots of good-looking straight men. Just because you're good-looking doesn't mean you're gay. But you don't take it in a bad way. You just thank them for the compliment and say, "Sorry, that's not what I'm into."
Yeah, and I come from a excuse me, a sports background, and that's a whole different kettle of fish. In the locker room, anybody, I don't know where anybody was coming from, but nobody said anything. That's for certain.
Oh
In the sport,
no.
I played baseball, basketball, football, macho bullshit. And I was never that, I was a very good athlete, but never that way. You're interviewing me now. I hope you know that. I was a good athlete, but never, never, those things never really, I don't know. And then they never came up. But if they did come up, I knew where those guys were coming from, as opposed to the theater, where it was a different vibe. But it's now growing up, movie wise, you'd go to the neighborhood playhouse, I would assume, to see the latest film. Any films ever that say now there are people that are gone, they're dead, they're never going to be seen again that we would want to interview. Mine would be Brando. That would be the guy that I would want on my program if he was still around. Is there anybody that's deceased that you say, boy, I'm so sorry that he or she is gone because I'd love to have him or her on my program.
Well, before I answer that, I will tell you that I think you would have been disappointed in Brando because any interview I watched with him was disappointing. He he
True.
didn't he didn't talk about the craft of acting or about his career with any pride or any joy. But to answer your question, the number one would have been Lucille Ball
Hmm.
because I mentioned to you that I was really severely bullied as a kid, and if I Love Lucy came on at 4:30 in the afternoon, and every day my only goal was to get home safe and sound so that I could turn on I Love Lucy and escape. And in my mind, she was like my friend. I fantasized that I was little Ricky. That one day Lucy and Desi would show up at my house and say that there had been a mistake, that I was really their son, and that they were going to take me away from all this. So Lucille Ball would have been the number one. And I also would have loved to interview Betty Davis or Joan Crawford or Humphrey Bogart, Clark Gable, all those people. I wish I could have. We had Lucy Arnaz on the show, and
Yes, I saw that too. Yes.
that was a really big one for me. And after the interview was over, she said, "Oh, Harvey, you should have started your show sooner. My mother would have loved you." And I said, "Well, I couldn't. Zoom wasn't invented then."
Right, right.
She said, "Oh, yeah, that's right." I said, I started the show as soon as Zoom came along. I couldn't have done it sooner. But the fact that Lucy Arnaz told me that Lucille Ball would have liked my interviewing style, that was a big moment. And my other really big moment was Dick Cavett, I have to say, having him on the show.
Yeah, he was great. I love Dick Cavett. Great. Even better than Carson. I like Cavett. And I love Carson too. Now just Lucy saying that must have left a mark on you. Just saying that about her. That show began in 1951, Harvey.
Yes, it
This
did.
is, it's unbelievable to know that we're still watching these reruns from 1951. What an
And I
iconic program
remember,
that was.
I remember so vividly. I grew up in the 60s. So when I was like in grade 6, which would have been 1966, I said to the teacher, "Oh, I just love I Love Lucy. And I so wish that Desi and Lucy would come and get." And she said, "Harvey, those are all reruns. They divorced. Those shows are old." I couldn't believe it. I didn't know what a rerun was. I thought this was ongoing now. And then it took me time to figure out that the Lucille Ball that we were seeing on TV on the Lucy show, that was the same woman. That was Lucille Ball in I Love Lucy. Because now we had color TVs and her hair was red.
Right.
And she was older. But if I could have interviewed those older stars, I would have loved it. Because I don't ever think they got great interview. I look at Betty Davis interviews, even with Dick Cavett, who probably did the best one. I could have done better. I know I could have.
I know you could have, because he used to sit there try to be coy and try to be clever. He
Yeah.
didn't get down to the nitty gritty
No.
like he should have. And she'd sit there and manipulate him. I saw the way she would just,
Well, you
say
know what it
smoking.
is? I think, and you would appreciate this as an interviewer yourself. Some of the people that do interviews or did interviews made it all about themselves.
Mhm.
And Johnny Carson, he didn't do an in-depth interview. He made it all about him. And Dick Cavett, I love him. I mean, he got the biggest stars in the world and he was witty, but you never, ever lost sight of the fact that it's the Dick Cavett show and that it's often all about him. I try very hard on my show to make it about my guest. I don't do a monologue like many other podcasters do, where they spend the first 10 minutes talking about themselves and what they ate for dinner and what they did last weekend. I make it all about my guest. It's not about me.
Yeah, I'm not big on not the introduction for the guest. I mean, establishing myself when I get on the air. If I just get on and I just start with the first topic. And if I have an interesting person, right to that person. That's the way I like to do business. Someone that really disappointed you. Now, again, if you elect to say nothing about this, I'll never hold it against you, because I don't want you to start coming on here and burn bridges. But someone that you said, boy, this is going to be great. I'm going to have such a ball with this person, and what a dud he became. Is there anybody?
Yes, there were.
Want to tell me?
I've been upfront about it. Adrienne Barbeau answered the phone 4 times during the interview. We had to keep
Oh,
stopping. Thank God I have an excellent editor. That was really hard to maintain the momentum. Bronson Pinchot, I don't know what I did wrong, but about halfway through, he said to me, "I'm done. I've had enough. I'm out of here." And I've never had that happen before or since.
wow.
And then there are the stars who don't really want to talk about their careers. They don't remember a whole lot. They live in the moment. Anne Margaret, we only got 19 minutes out of Anne Margaret. That's the shortest interview. She was lovely. She was sweet. She was kind. She just didn't remember a whole lot about all these movies that I asked her about because she's done so many and she doesn't sit back and think about her career, about her past. And a similar one to that was Brenda Vaccaro. I had to edit out a whole bunch of questions that I had asked her when she said, honestly, I don't remember making that movie. I don't remember working with that actor. It's not because there's anything wrong with their memories. It's that they're very busy. They've done hundreds of movies and TV shows, and it isn't important to them to remember it. They're on to the next project. They're living in the moment. I understand that. But as an interviewer, it can be a bit unsettling.
Yes, unsettling is a good word. And you want something, you want a little something, and you don't get it. And then they come out with wrong information. You have the information here that's documented, and they'll give you names that were never in that film they're referring to. Or never, so, but it's their, it's their, I guess, memory. But these people that you mentioned are 85 years old, something thereabouts. They're up there in age. I know Brenda Vaccaro with her voice and everything else. She's doing the circuit though, Harvey. I've seen her on several shows, and she did quite well, but she's a little bit flighty.
Yeah, yeah. And that's okay. I've learned to go with the flow. But an interviewer like me asks very detailed questions. They're very focused questions. I don't do like what you do, where you're much more conversational than me. I don't have that gift. So I'm very structured because I've done all this research and if they've written a book, I ask them detailed questions about why they said this in the book and what did they mean by that. So if they don't remember, it can be a little awkward.
No doubt about it. No doubt about it. And I find myself saying, don't you remember when you, and they'll say, no. No, I have no idea what you're talking about. You mentioned about Brando, and that was interesting because you're so right. One of the worst interviews, Kaidi Chong, I think I have that name right.
Connie Chung?
Connie Chung, my fault. There was another anchor in New York by Kaidi Chong. This is Connie Chung and Brando, round about maybe 89, something like that, maybe in the early 90s or something. Boy, did he let her down and give it to her and just kind of play with her. And it was really something. But so those stars that you think are going to be wonderful sometimes don't turn out that way. Now,
well, and Larry King did a legendary interview with Brando, and it was an embarrassment.
Yeah. What did Brando say? He said something. Why do you call me Larry? Why do you call me all the time? Something like that,
Yeah.
or I can't. Something very strange. Or would you wash my feet, Larry? It had something to do with feet. I actually remember that. And Larry was noted for being unprepared. Now, there was a guy who actually was unprepared, kind of got the basic information about whomever it was that was going to sit opposite him and just winged it for the most part.
I find that fascinating. I was a real Larry King addict because I so wanted to be him. But boy, was it frustrating if you've got a mind like mine that really wants depth. I want to get to know these guests. I want to know what makes them tick. How did they get where they got? I'm quite fascinated by successful people in every field and famous people. I want to know what it feels like to be them. And he just wasn't into doing that. And
Go ahead. I'm sorry.
I just was going to say that, that's what I want. And so I'm I try to be the kind of interviewer that I wanted to watch as a viewer.
Who's one that you haven't got that you need to get?
Well, I'd love Barbara Streisand. She's my number one. Meryl Streep, De Niro, Pacino, all of those super A-listers. I have not gotten any of them. I've had some, William H. Macy, Stacy Keach. We've had some great legends, Diane Cannon, and in the music world, we've had, Air Supply, we've had Dire Straits, we've had the Captain and Tennille. I mean, I've had some great stars, Sheena Easton, but some of the really big movie stars. I'd love to get Sean Penn. I'd love to get Tom Hanks. I haven't had a yes from any of them just yet.
Those are big boys and big girls. Those are the big ones. But they have to be, if the person actually wants to do it, they'll do it. That's what I found.
Yeah.
The publicist goes only so far. If this person is not geared to do an interview, they're not going to do it. Or the other way around. The other way around is very much. But now, where's the direction of this wonderful Harvey Brownstone interviews, by the way, folks? After you're done here, go right directly there because you'll see some great stuff. Where is this going? Where do you see it going in years to come?
Well, that's a good question. We are televised in the UK. And certainly that was a thrill to be approached by a cable TV network in the UK. That happened 3 years ago. So in the UK, we're on TV. We're not televised anywhere else. I would have loved to be the next Larry King and be on TV doing in-depth interviews. But what I have found is that the networks don't think the public has the attention span for an interview like mine. I've had networks suggest that I do a 30-minute show with 3 guests. So when you take out the commercials, you're left with 22 minutes. 3 guests in 22 minutes is about 7 minutes per guest. That's not what I do. I'm not Entertainment Tonight. So my initial dream would have been to have a platform on a major network or streaming platform. But I have now come to conclude that YouTube is actually better because I can do everything I want. I can make my show as long as I want or as short as I want. I can edit it the way I want. I don't have to deal with any network executives. My audience is worldwide. We have a huge audience in Australia, New Zealand, Canada, US, England. I think I'm happy where I am. If you ask me, where do I want to be in 5 years? Well, let's see what happens after the movie comes out. Obviously, that's going to generate some interest in the show. But honestly, I think YouTube is good for me. I have found an audience. It's not hundreds of millions of people, but it is millions of people. And they seem to like what I do. I'm getting overall guests that I really want. Yesterday we had Jennifer O'Neill on the show. You remember Summer of 42?
Oh, yes.
Now, every straight man would remember Jennifer O'Neill from Summer of 42. She hasn't given an interview in years. She came out of retirement for me. I am getting lots, Diane Cannon came on the show. She hadn't done interviews in a long time. She's 88 years old. We got Mamie Van Doren. She's 90 something. I'm getting very good guests and they seem to be happy to come on YouTube. So I think I'm fine the way it is.
Well, recently, here's some names and just your first thoughts when I say these names. I saw Judy Collins recently. How was that experience?
She was really lovely. She is a woman who's had enormous tragedy in her life, primarily because her son died and her only child. And she's really never recovered from that. And she sings and writes music to heal herself. And I found her to be very spiritual and quite profound. She was really one of my favorites.
John Tesh.
John Tesh surprised me with his ability to weave his faith into his work. He is a man of faith. I've had others like that, Pat Boone as well, Marie Osmond, and Jennifer O'Neill yesterday talked about her faith. But John Tesh was able to transition from hosting the most popular interview show in the world, Entertainment Tonight, to a massive music career and then a big radio show. And I found him to be incredibly savvy and astute about show business, about the business, while at the same time, very, very bonded to his faith, to his belief in God. And, he had a terrible cancer scare. He was given a fatal diagnosis, and he talked on the show about how he overcame that cancer when he wasn't given much time to live, and how much his faith was a part of that. That really moved me.
And here's one that he always was an advocate for children in films and TV, Paul Peterson.
Oh, he was lovely. Paul Peterson is not well. He's on oxygen. He's got very severe lung problems. And I found him to be so kind and so willing to open his heart up about what it's like to be a child star and how difficult it is to grow up and have the whole world disappointed in you because you did grow up. You're not the kid from the Donna Reed show anymore, and they want you to stay that kid, and you're not. And how do you make a career and a life for yourself? Imagine being 15 years old and being a has-been at 15.
Oh,
and
yeah.
so he talked a lot about the substance abuse and the self-esteem issues and what he's done for other child stars who are going through it. I loved him.
One of my actor favorites, F. Murray Abraham.
Oh, well, now you're talking. Talk about an A-lister. Murray is such a doll. He's such a sweetheart. He was so thrilled to be asked questions that he'd never been asked before. He was absolutely magical. And he was dramatic the way he talked about doing Amadeus and about some of the big Broadway roles he's done. I love Murray. We've remained good friends. That's been a really nice part about being an interviewer. Sometimes you get to remain friends with them. And Murray's one of those people.
Oh, that's great. That's great. How about the book that's coming now? Just talk about that more in depth.
Well, it's called Without Prejudice. The theme of the book is that you have to believe in yourself and don't let other people's image of you impact who you really are. So, of course, I deal with the bullying. I deal with the parental rejection. Although I must tell you, Ralph, that I think that my parents did me a favor, because when they threw me out, I was so determined to prove to them that I was going to be somebody, that I was going to make them proud of me, that I channeled all of that anger into enormous ambition. My parents really made me an overachiever. And so I write in the book about how I turned parental rejection into a strong motivator for success. And the truth is that even after I became a lawyer, that still didn't seem to be good enough for my parents to really be proud of me. And so I worked my ass off. And at 38 years old, I became one of the youngest judges ever, and the first openly gay judge. I did all that because of my parents, because I wanted them to accept me and love me and not be ashamed of me. So there's a lot of that in the book about how to deal with parental rejection and how you can make it work for you. And, it's not just gay people. I've had lots of friends whose parents didn't approve of the career choice or their choice of partner or the way they live their lives. There's many, many people I've learned who had never really felt accepted by their parents. They just felt like they let their parents down. And so I deal with that. Of course, now that I'm not a judge anymore, I deal with the justice system. I'm now able to say what I really think of the criminal justice system and the family court system, because I don't have to keep my mouth shut anymore. So that's in the book too. And then, of course, I talk about how I managed to reinvent myself as a talk show host. I'm interested in people who reinvent themselves. You talked about being an athlete, you're an actor, you're a talk show host. You keep reinventing yourself and keeping yourself current. That's a skill.
Yeah, it's it's something because I'm so technologically challenged, can we say? I'd do better with two cans and a string. But once I get behind the microphone, I'm fine. But it's the whole setup that drives me wild. And it's just a new world, Harvey. We're immersed in this technology. What do you think of AI?
I'm not a big fan of it, only because I'm beginning to think that human intellect is becoming irrelevant, but I think it's here to stay. It doesn't matter what we think of it, it's here to stay.
And do you think it's going to be to our detriment or an enhancer?
I think it can be used to enhance, it certainly can be used to improve what we write, and it might be very helpful in science. I just don't like the idea that university students are using it to commit fraud, basically, to pass things off as having come from them that didn't. That it was
Well,
generated by algorithms in a computer. That's not human creativity.
it's a little frightening. It's a lot frightening, actually. Scares the pants off me because it's just ridiculous what you can. What did I say? You said De Niro before. I saw De Niro say something nice about Trump that he never said about the president because he despises the president, and we won't get into that. But the fact that you had De Niro speaking on this video and saying good things about President Trump, I knew it was phony. I knew it was AI, but I knew it because of the context of what he was saying. But it was so real, Harvey. You would say that this could not be a fake, but it was. How do we
Yeah,
know what's authentic and what's not?
we don't. And I remember calling my doctor's office a few weeks ago, and it was AI answering the phone. I could tell that the voice wasn't a person,
Mhm.
and that's the world we're living in now.
Wow. Well, we have to make this a usual thing that we do every few months. What do you say?
I'd love that. I'd love that. You did a wonderful job interviewing me. I so appreciate you having me on your show.
Oh, you did fantastic also, and everything I thought it would be. Harvey Brownstone interviews. Again, don't hesitate. Go right there, right now, after this video, and go check it out. You're gonna have yourself a time for about 4 or 5 hours because you won't be able to stop going from one to the other. I guarantee it. Thank you so much, Harvey. I appreciate it.
Thank you so much for having me on the show, Ralph. All the best to you and your family.
You too. You too. Take care.
You too.